Are you expecting to close down entire agencies, like President Trump has talked about the Department of Education, for example? Are you going to be closing down departments?
We expect mass reductions. We expect certain agencies to be deleted outright. We expect mass reductions in force in areas of the federal government that are bloated. We expect massive cuts among federal contractors and others who are overbilling the federal government. So, yes, we expect all of the above. And I think people will be surprised by, how quickly we're able to move with some of those changes, given the legal backdrop the Supreme Court has given us.
Hi, everybody. This is Lad Tilgard. Welcome to another episode of Stand and Speak. Those were some powerful words from Vivek Ramaswamy, who has recently been appointed as one of the co-heads, along with Elon Musk, of the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, as many of you have already heard. Let me tell you some facts about where we're at as a country right now. Right now, there's 2.3 million federal government employees. Their average raise in 2024 was a robust 5.2%. Their average salary, $106,000. And the average value of a benefit package for those federal government employees was $44,000 per person. In the private sector, that's about $13,000 if you're lucky. That's the value of your health, medical, dental, vision, everything. We all know that federal government employees have a very robust benefits package. They're pretty hard to fire. It's considered very stable employment. But what you may not know is that they're doing a lot better than the private sector, who is paying for their salaries. At the last time I checked, 8 of the 10 wealthiest counties in all of the United States were in the DC metro area, Maryland, Virginia, Northern Virginia, and so on. 8 of the 10 wealthiest counties in the United States. That's lobbyists, contractors, federal employees, politicians, and so on. So there is a lot of cutting that needs to be done. Our national debt right now, as you can see, is over $36 trillion. The national debt per person, that's $106,000 for every person, and for every taxpayer, that's $270,000 per person. Our budget is $7 trillion, and our budget deficit, so the difference between what we take in and what we spend, is $2 trillion. So we're spending $2 trillion more than what we take in. And our federal debt to gross domestic product is 122%. So in 2000, that was 55%. In 1960, it was 52%. This is higher than it's been at any time in the history of the United States. At the end of World War II, the debt to GDP was about 100%, give or take. You can fact check me in the comments section if I'm wrong about that. But now the federal debt versus GDP is the highest it's ever been, 122%. Something's got to be done somewhere. We know that there's a lot of spending that's in Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security that can't really be touched. Those are entitlements. It would take a massive restructuring to do that. But there is a lot of fat that needs to be cut. And let me hit you with a Forbes article from November 2024 that these are 10 public sector jobs that make over $300,000 a year. $300,000. That's a lot of money. Medical officer, they make up to a federal government medical officer makes up to $490,000 a year. Consumer safety officer, that's somebody that inspects meat and veggies for the USDA, $345,000. Statistician, that's a math nerd who works for like the NIH or Social Security or something. They make $339,000. So all the way down, chemists, project managers, administrative officers, bank examiners, $300,000 $300,000 a year. That puts them squarely in the top 1% of all wage earners in the United States. I personally don't know any project managers that make $300,000 in the private sector. And what's interesting about that, I knew a contractor once, just a few years ago actually, who worked on federal government systems. And his job was so incredibly easy, it made me want to cry. He would go in maybe once or twice a week. He'd hit a couple of buttons. He'd answer a few questions. And his contractor role paid him a high hourly wage that amounted to over $250,000 a year. Now, I don't know about you, but those kind of jobs are what Vivek and Elon are going to be looking for to cut. Now, a little bit of a national debt is not a bad thing. Alexander Hamilton was the guy who began the first national debt. So I want to read this a little bit to you on the national debt from as the Secretary of Treasury from 1789 to 1795. His report on the public credit, which included a plan for addressing the nation's staggering $40 million of debt. Hamilton recommended paying only the interest on the debt and deferring principal. An aspect that sparked particular controversy was the intention to incorporate the wartime debt, it's a Revolutionary War debt, of states into the federal debt. They didn't like the efficiency of state taxation efforts, supported the creation of a unified national debt, and the assumption was that it would increase the size of the national credit market that Hamilton hoped to create. The market would also help establish America's international credit rating and hinder individual states from becoming too powerful in the new nation. So what this was this was a young country, the United States. They needed credit, like you need credit. The way to get credit, if you're a young person, is to take on some debt and pay it off. That's what Alexander Hamilton was talking about here. He said, let's take on a national debt that's modest, and then that would free the states up to conduct commerce. The U.S. will handle that debt by assessing tariffs and collecting monies on trade. But if you are excessive with a national debt, just like you're excessive with your first credit card, it can lead to big trouble. And we are in big trouble. So Thomas Jefferson did not like the debt. He did not like the debt idea. He said, I would wish the debt paid tomorrow. He wishes it to never be paid, but always to be a thing wherewith to corrupt and manage the legislature. So what Jefferson was saying there was that I don't like it, it's risky. It's kind of like if somebody says, don't take out a credit card ever because you might overspend on it. It was really short-term thinking on Jefferson's part. But Hamilton, he was right about this. But we've gone too far. Now, you may have heard about the Canadian government workers' strike from 2023. It lasted about 2.5 weeks. And here's a video showing this is what we might come across here as Vivek and Elon take a flamethrower to the government bureaucracy. Watch this video.
Our cameras captured a clash between striking workers and a driver leaving the service center this morning.
So those are some angry government workers. Canada had increased their payments to public sector employees, the bureaucracy, by 50% in the year leading up to this strike. They didn't care. They didn't want to work. They didn't want to go to the office. They wanted to continue working from home, and the government workers in Canada wanted big raises. So they struck, they rioted, They impeded commerce. They just raised all kinds of heck, and they were off work for a few weeks. Nobody really knows what harm it did that having those government workers off work that amount of time. And here's some of the departments where that was off work: the Agriculture Department, the Canada Revenue Agency, the Canadian Transportation Agency, Border Services Agency, Veterans Affairs, Atlantic Canada, and so on. All of there's dozens of different agencies that just stopped working. 155,000 employees, and the passports were a little slow. I think some veterans didn't get the services that they needed. It wasn't perfect, but the country didn't stop, and there wasn't a lot of pain. Vivek Ramaswamy has been saying for years that we could cut 75% of the federal government workforce and do just fine. And I think he's right. So government overreach harms businesses, they harm people, they impede economic progress. We learned back when I was in graduate school for business in corporate finance class, we learned that the natural inclination of business managers is to build empires. For sure, that's the case with government department and agency heads as well. They want to build empires. Politicians, they want to build empires. The national debt and the huge government workforce is a bipartisan failure going back decades and decades and decades. From George W. Bush building this Homeland Security Department, which is just a bureaucracy managing other bureaucracies, and Obama with Obamacare and expanding the government workforce tremendously. This goes back a long way. The only thing that stops a business manager from building empires are interested shareholders and investors that come along and say, you're not being efficient with my money, so stop building an empire and focus on efficiencies and delivering services efficiently. But given their natural inclination, business managers will build empires. They'll keep expanding, they'll add people, they'll increase their pay, and they'll keep building and building and building until the company goes bankrupt or something else happens. The United States, no one knows where the cliff is for going bankrupt, but it is closer to us now than it was a few years ago. And the economic strangulation that's caused by the national debt and this huge government workforce is massive. I want to read a little bit from Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon's article in the Wall Street Journal about DOGE. Most legal edicts aren't laws enacted by Congress, but rules and regulations promulgated by unelected bureaucrats, tens of thousands of them every year. Government enforcement decisions and discretionary expenditures aren't made by the elected president or his political appointees, but by millions of unelected, unappointed civil servants within government agencies who view themselves as immune from firing thanks to civil services protections. So what Vivek and Elon are going to do is set up outside of government a team of legal experts, a team of government experts to go in and find out where these inefficiencies are, find out where duplication of efforts is, which is a huge thing within the government. Years ago, I owned a small sandwich company, a restaurant that packaged wraps and sandwiches to deliver them to coffee shops for wholesale. And it was a big part of our business. Because we sold wraps and not sandwiches on bread, the Department of Agriculture said, the Ohio Department of Agriculture said that we had to be inspected like a slaughterhouse. We had to have white lab coats, clipboards, big processes, everything you would expect in a slaughterhouse, which is detailed, and you want it to be detailed. We were packaging grocery store quality meats, putting it on wraps and sandwiches with mustard, putting it in a container that was well labeled, keeping it refrigerated, sending it to a coffee shop. Which was fine if it was on bread. But since it was on a wrap, bread that was flat, we were supposed to get the Ohio Department of Agriculture involved. We didn't want to do that, so we switched everything to bread. So we had a little argument with the Department of Agriculture. Our state representative got involved, and we decided we're just going to sell sandwiches instead of wraps. However, some of those sandwiches were tuna fish salad sandwiches, pre-made tuna fish salad by a restaurant service company. We put it on bread, put it in a package, send it off to a coffee shop. Big deal. We were a restaurant that was well inspected, very clean, great employees. This would be like Panera taking a tuna fish sandwich and sending it over to a coffee shop to sell. The FDA manages tuna fish salad sandwiches, believe it or not, because it's seafood. So the FDA, seafood, U.S. Department of Agriculture, meat, State Department of Agriculture, wraps, and so on. You got to be kidding me. So without going through the FDA's inspection process, which is, imagine you're getting approved for a new drug or something like that. We didn't want anything to do with that because it was ridiculous. So we would have had to go through the full FDA inspection process, whatever the hell that meant, to sell 20 tuna fish salad sandwiches to coffee shops. If that wasn't stupid enough, I sold that restaurant. And about a month after I sold it, the new owner said that an FDA employee came in to make sure we weren't selling tuna salad sandwiches wholesale and stayed in our restaurant for a whole week with his government employee car outside, government employee everything outside. You taxpayers paid for an FDA employee to go in and stare down a small restaurant to make sure that they didn't sell tuna fish salad sandwiches. Is that what you want your money to go to? There's stories like that all over the federal government. John McCain used to rail about them. Rand Paul railed about them. They're insane. So there are duplications of efforts. There's waste. There's people that don't do any work. Find them and boot them out, just like Vivek said. Here's a video by Vivek, with Vivek saying that they're going to slash and burn the administrative state. And I hope he's right.
No, I want to be very clear about the scale. I want to be very clear about the scale that we're thinking here. We're not thinking small. We're playing big here because we have a once-in-a-generation mandate right now. The American people have voted for drastic reform of the government, and our federal government is broken. It's no secret that it is a fourth branch of government, the administrative state, that makes most of the rules, that creates a federal bureaucracy that's hampering our economy. So what do we want to do? We want to go in and slash and burn that bureaucracy to help Americans, stimulate the economy, and to restore self-governance again, Sean. The people we elect to run the government, they're not even the ones who run the government anymore. It's these unelected bureaucrats. Republican politicians have talked about fixing this for a long time, not with a lot of progress. So I do think it's going to take a couple of outsiders. Elon and I have built a great friendship over the last year. We're working together intensely, and we're not going to stop till we get the job.
So Vivek has some good ideas there about where to cut. I think every Republican presidential candidate since about 1984 has said that they were going to eliminate the Department of Education, which is roughly 4,500 bureaucrats that since its founding in 1979, the United States has went from first to 34th or something like that in worldwide educational achievement. These are bureaucrats. They don't do anything productive. Education is a local and state issue, and anything that this Department of Education has done has been harmful or detrimental to learning, and it should be deleted, as Vivek said. And there's others. The U.S. Department of Agriculture is just a hot mess of wasted energy. When you think of the USDA, you think, oh, they're going in and inspecting the meat supply, and they've got lab coats on, and they're checking. They've got veterinarians and all this stuff. No. This is not the USDA that you know of. This is the USDA that pushes food stamps on the entire population. That's wasteful in spending. That has thousands of employees that don't do anything. They should be a big target. Even the Department of Defense has thousands of people that nobody knows what they do. They've failed 7 straight audits, so even they don't know what they do. There are just, you could start at any government agency and find waste and ridiculous things that you could never get away with in the private sector. So the federal government is in hot water. They got a high national debt. The DOGE agency is the best hope we've had in my lifetime for trimming that bureaucracy back and getting back to closer to a more efficient government. Like Bill Clinton had said in the mid-90s, and he followed through on it pretty well with the Republican Congress led by Newt Gingrich. He said that the era of big government is over. And they cut a lot of government back then, balanced the budget around year 2000. Kudos. I give more credit to the Republican Congress, but Clinton went along with it. And they did some good things, and the economy was roaring. And it's not inconsequential as a reason why that the economy was roaring is because government was off their backs. The more government people you have, the more regulations are being pushed onto people, and it's whether they are legitimate or not. But we'll close here with this video of Elon saying that really the government's wasting people's money.
So if you do choose to be the head of the Department of Government Efficiency?
Yeah, DOGE.
Yep. What do you think about we stop giving money to other countries such as Israel, Ukraine, and we stop funding forever wars that most likely is going to the deep state anyway?
Yeah. Well, I think in general the amount of waste that happens with the federal government is really staggering. It's a staggering amount of waste of taxpayer money. And if we're, for any given expenditure, we have to say, well, what does this do for the citizens of America? Like, how is this good for the people of America? It's their money. Like, for some weird reason, a lot of people in the sort of, state or whatever, the politicians, they seem to forget that the money being spent is your money. And if it's not being spent in a way that is beneficial to the American people, it's a misuse of the funds. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Elon there. So that's all we have for today, folks. I'm glad you tuned in. You can find us on X at Lad Dilgard or on YouTube, Stand and Speak. And we hope you have a great week. Thank you.